Virology in its entire history has never demonstrated that X exists inside the fluids of a sick person where it is claimed to be. They assume it is there and proceed to add it to a variety of confounding variables, which flies in the face of the scientific method. So if you do not have an independent variable to vary and manipulate to see if it produces the observed natural phenomenon in question, you are not following the scientific method by definition. Anything that is claiming to be scientific that does not adhere to the scientific method is by definition pseudoscience. That is what virology is, according to their own definitions.
Once I surrendered and accepted what was going on into my system, my healing started to recover tenfold, because I stopped trying to get in the way of it, because I wanted to go out and live my life, what I thought at that time, the way I needed to live it.
Your perception of a situation has a direct impact on your physical expression. The most important thing when it comes to our health is our foundational beliefs, thoughts, and feelings. And the scary thing for most people when coming to that conclusion is it's like, holy shit, dude, I cannot blame anyone outside of me for my current state of being anymore.
Mr. Alec Zeck, welcome. Thank you so much. Been looking forward to this, man. It's been in the pipeline for a while.
A long time, man. We've done Instagram lives before together, but yes. I don't think anything other than that. And that was a while ago, like 4 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. When did we meet on socials? I think it was around all the fun times in 2020, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I started doing what I do, so to speak, in May of 2020. So sometime soon after that. It was either early 2021 or late 2020.
I think you came out of the forces then, though, right? Straight
Dude,
around
I was in the army until April 29th, 2021.
Oh, okay. Wow. So when you were verging into this, whatever you class this work as, really, I guess speech, I would take it as, you was already in the army.
Yeah, I was in the army for 5 years. So I commissioned as an officer in 2016. And when you graduate from West Point in the United States, you have to serve a minimum of 5 on active duty as an officer. So I got out basically right at my 5-year mark, which was in April of 2021. So yes, when I was speaking my perspective on what was going on in the world, I was still in the army. And it was, in hindsight, the right thing to do, of course. At the time was incredibly risky, but I felt really compelled to do it. So I did it, and I just made sure I did it in a way that was technically abiding by this thing called the Hatch Act, which is where if you're serving in a government position, you are to refrain from commenting on things that are of a political nature and taking sides on things that are of a political nature. And so I just was very careful to do that. And anytime I referred to people in government who are making decisions, I would just use a vague term like the experts. So I got out of the army clean, if you will. But 3 weeks before I got out, The Guardian wrote a hit piece on me and outed that I was in the army, because most people at that time didn't know that I was in the army. They just saw this random guy named Alec Zeck who they'd never heard of, just speaking his mind on things, screenshotting my tweets as I do to share my perspective. And I was very careful not to reveal that I was in the army, because I didn't want the army to gather that I was the same individual doing these things online, because there's millions of people in the armed services in the United States. So, and there was so much chaos and stuff going on. So I figured they won't notice as long as I don't say, hey, I'm in the, as long as I'm not on video in uniform saying, hey, I'm speaking out, But then The Guardian outed that I was in the army. And then I got a text from my boss's boss, essentially, brigade commander, full bird colonel. So he messaged me and said, WTF. Can I cuss on this show, by the way?
Dude, you're talking to a Londoner.
He texted me. I had a good relationship with him because I did really well at my job. I was an operations officer at that time for a basic training unit. And he texted me and said, what the fuck? Why am I getting a call from the Army Public Affairs Office? Not my unit's public affairs office, the big Army, the central public affairs office for the Army, getting messages and emails from them talking about how you are running an anti-vaccine conspiracy theory organization. And dude, it was interesting because, not to go off on a huge tangent on this, it might serve a relevant purpose regarding forgiveness, which has been just a big theme in my life lately in general. But at that time, I had not spoken to my dad in a little under 4 years. And there's a lot of background context for why, but a lot of pain related to my relationship with my dad growing up. And I'd gotten to a genuine point of feeling forgiveness in my heart, of sort of accepting what I was exposed to when I was younger and what was done to me when I was younger. Got to a genuine place of forgiveness, which in my opinion requires that you work through all of the other things that are layered on top of that. You can't force forgiveness, right? But I'd gotten to that genuine place of forgiveness, and I hadn't spoken to my dad in 4 years. But when I thought of him, or I did a few like writing ceremonies where you journal and then burn it and things like this, and a lot of childhood trauma healing, repatterning, and doing like meditative therapy where I would meditate and get into a meditative state to be the adult that needed to step in those moments when I was younger and actually reparent myself in some ways. But got to a place of genuine forgiveness, and I was so fearful of my dad growing up, so fearful of his authority. So here's the situation with my brigade commander texting me. It's a very uncertain time where, the Army is at that time fully going along with the whole charade. And I, being one of the only people in my unit, knowing that I'm about to get out anyway, am not playing along with it. So people already knew where I was coming from on an individual basis. They just didn't realize I was running a, quote, anti-vaccine conspiracy theory organization. And here I am being fearful of like, oh my God, are they going to label me an insider threat, some sort of like terrorist, and prosecute me according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice? All these lingering thoughts surrounding fear of authority were popping up inside of me, right? And I get a phone call from my dad out of the blue within a few days of that happening. First time I had spoken to him in years. Calls me bawling, crying, apologizing for everything that he had done to me. So there was a previous authority figure coming in to help me complete the circle on my fear of authority from my childhood, right when I'm faced with another situation that I am freaking out. Like, you can ask Kylie, like she was like, you were not in a good space. And she was scared too, right? Like, especially it was at the height of COVID. It was a very uncertain time. And I was boldly going against all of it, right? And it was the exact medicine I needed in that moment to face the situation that was presented to me and deal with it in the appropriate way. So I just politely responded to my brigade commander and said, sir, the organization is comprised of a variety of doctors of all types. We host a podcast that gets opinions across the spectrum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are my deeply held beliefs based on, and he had already known the situation with Kylie reversing 2 autoimmune conditions and things like this. And he basically just texted me back and it was like, okay, we won't do anything related to this. Just lay low and shut the fuck up for the next 3 weeks until you get out, and then you're good to go. So yeah, man, it was a wild, wild journey. It's been a wild journey and a beautiful one too.
Yeah, man, I hear you. Thank you for sharing that as well. I think that's really deeply powerful, especially with the authority figure from even just looking at the hierarchy of the military in general, being an authority figure, as well as the father lineage there, the father representative there for sure. And that's something that I actually feel really grateful to know you, Alec, and something that I found very inspirational by watching you and knowing you over the last few years. Something that I hold dearly in my heart is your ability to speak your truth and and be authentic in the face of adversity with all of this stuff going on. I mean, I watched you have about 5-10 burner accounts when that was all going on. When you get an account, it would go and then you just share and then it would be taken down and you'd start again under another name, another alias. And it was just like getting to this point. And I was just like, fuck, this dude wants to really just share what's on his heart. And I really aspired to that because I was in a place at myself where I wasn't fully in my expression of my authenticity in my speaking my truth. So watching you, I was like, there was parts of me that was like firstly triggered by like, how can this guy do this? how can this guy like share like this so well? Because that was a part of me that was suppressed in me, you know? So watching you, you've really been a big part of that journey for me to be like, yeah, look what this can happen when you speak your truth. Look what happens when you speak your authenticity. And even though you've been helping people with empowerment and self-empowerment and let's just say, I don't know, we're going to talk about the word sovereignty or whatever. Let's whatever that means to you. Okay. But me, self-empowerment, it's just that, actually there's another part that you've also been inspiring people probably as well. Because that for me was like how your ability to just go and just share. So thank you for always showing up and, you know, being you. So that's been really beautiful to have and to witness.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. And before we go any further and like before we go like deeper into and who knows where this will go, but I want to say congratulations on like the new little tribe member. And how's that having, you know, it's your third child, right?
Yeah. Can I share the story about that? Because I think you had Kylie on when she was still pregnant, right?
Yes. She was, I'd loved having Kylie on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. She said she was so nervous after that. I'm like, I bet you did great. Yeah.
She did amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, of course she did. Man, so there's just elements of this story regarding our son that are so beautiful and you just can't make it up. And it just puts you back in a position of childlike wonder and awe for how this reality works. And I bet the people listening to or watching this, if you start paying attention more in your life, you will find these magical moments all around you. And the more you focus on them, the more they appear. And so Kylie and I were not trying to get pregnant. We just weren't careful for 10 months, but like not careful for 10 months. So like no expectations, right? My oldest son was 6 at the time, walks up to us in the kitchen, nonchalantly says, "Mom, you're pregnant." We're like, we weren't talking about it. There was no thought in our mind that she could be pregnant. This was before her period was supposed to come, right? No concept that this could be the case. Son just walks up to us nonchalantly, "Mom, you're pregnant." We're like, "What?" It's like, "You're pregnant." Matter of factly, you know, "You're pregnant." We're like, why do you say that? And he was like, "Because I just know." And then he walked away. And a few days later, she misses her period. And then I'm making some food in the kitchen and I can tell that she's pregnant immediately because she goes, "What's that smell?" And I look at her and she looks at me and I'm like, "Oh." And she's like, "Oh shit." Like, "Oh, I actually am." Her sense of smell like increases like crazy. It happens to a lot of women. And what was so incredible, fast forwarding now a few months, there's multiple instances where Kylie came to me and she was like, I feel like I'm being visited by our son. I feel like our son is talking to me. I feel like he's speaking with me. And she even said before he was born that she felt like he was going to be born on March 31st. That's when he ended up being born, was March 31st.
Of course.
But, of course, right? So another cool element of this, and I'm still trying to figure out what this means, but we kept on finding feathers everywhere. And no bullshit, dude. We just found one. We have a little carrier, this little thing called a tot pack that we carry our son in. And he had been sitting in it this morning on our front porch while Kylie and I are having some coffee. We leave the top pack out there, so we bring him inside and just leave it out there. Go back to pick it up to put him in it again today, and there's a little, I'm not even kidding you, we just found this today, a little feather sitting inside the top pack. We like something around him, we keep finding little feathers everywhere, and we're still trying to figure out what it means. Look at it like as a gift from the birds, and that's actually what went into his name when we settled on the name. So I wanted to name him Oliver, and we were going to call him Ollie, because I think Australians, like a lot of Australian kids are named Oliver, and the way they say Ollie, he just sounds so cool. And I was like, I really like the name Oliver. Around the beginning of her 3rd trimester, she was like, I feel like his name starts with an S, but I couldn't come up with a name that started with an S that I liked. I'm like, what name for a boy that starts with S? Couldn't really find anything. And we came across this name Shai, which is spelled S-H-A-I. I was like, Shai, wow, what does that mean? And the moment we saw it, it stood out, and Kylie was like, wow, I think that might be the name. And then we looked it up, and it means gift from God in Hebrew. And we're like, okay, that's it. And then that's when we're like, oh, this makes perfect sense. All these little feathers that we keep finding everywhere are like gifts, offerings from the birds to welcome our new son coming in, right? And then, of course, my oldest son, knowing that she was pregnant before we did. And then home birth experience. there's some pretty cool elements with that too. Just regarding surrender and acceptance. Like it's just, when you pay attention to your life, life is the greatest teacher, man. It really is. Like life experience is the greatest teacher by far. Like you can read things conceptually in a book and it can help you look at things through a different lens, of course, but you're never going to know something until you experience it directly. And so home birth experience, this is our first home birth. Our second was born in a birthing center. So first born in a hospital. So we've had that full experience, know exactly what that's like. No vaccines, but did all the other interventions. Second one, born in a birthing center, which is essentially just like a house with a master bedroom with a bathtub, born in a bathtub. Third one though, with Shai at home. And about an hour and a half into like active labor, maybe a little bit less than an hour and a half into active labor, our midwife who's there has a little monitor to monitor the baby's heartbeat and is monitoring the baby's heartbeat. And in between contractions, she's finding that his heart rate is not coming back up to where it should be. So she starts getting this very sort of scared look on her face. She was managing it well as a midwife, but still nonetheless, you could tell something was wrong. And she was kind of going, I don't know, like shaking her head a little bit in between contractions. You know, Kylie's in active labor and it's my job as the man to make the situation feel safe and secure so that she can just be in the labor process. And got to a point where she finally let us know, hey, his heartbeat is not recovering. His heart rate is not recovering like it should be. This could be a really serious situation. If it doesn't pick back up soon, we might have to transfer. Like this could be an emergency. And Kylie and I look at each other and I definitely felt some fear. I won't lie and say that I didn't. I did. I felt some fear because all of the what ifs surrounding like, oh, are we going to lose our son during a home birthing experience? Here I am, like a quote, holistic health influencer. They're going to make an example out of me to showcase like why home birth is dangerous. All these things just all the crazy thoughts start going in my head, right? Like, am I about to lose my son? Am I about to lose my freaking son? And then the moment we got to a place of acceptance with that, in that moment, literally just like accepted it. Like Kylie and I looking at each other and I didn't want her to feel like she failed, you know? And that was my other worry, is her feeling like she failed if we had to transfer. But we look at each other and we're like, whatever we have to do for our son, we'll do it. The moment we reached that point of acceptance, everything turned around. Heart rate recovered, was totally fine. Everything was going normal again. Literally, like right after that, I'm talking about she had an oxygen tank with her, and she was like, if we do this here, like it was a split second decision, like moment by moment decision between contractions, like what is the next step to do. She brought out an oxygen tank with a breathing mask just in case for the baby. She like was considering giving Kylie oxygen, like all of this stuff happening, right? But got to that point of acceptance and surrender with the situation. It all turned around instantly. And then our son ends up being born in call. For people who are unfamiliar with what in call is, it's when you're born with the amniotic sac still intact, like a bubble, essentially encapsulating the baby. So, Shai, gift from God, born in call. We had to unwrap our baby as if he was gift wrapped. And we had chosen the name Shai, which means gift from God. And we could not have possibly known that he was going to be born in call. So, wow. Yeah, man, the whole story is just just beautiful. And it's just such a beautiful teacher for life, for God's grace, for acceptance, for trusting in the process, for trusting in the body, for fully accepting whatever's to come and knowing that we'll get through it. And just beautiful, man. Yeah. So that's that story.
Stunning. And have you got them in training with like Dr. Edith's, they're already in training. They're doing chess like blindfolded. Just to say as well, another thank you as well, Alec. I messaged you about this already, just saying like, thank you for everyone that you share and like speak to on your, congratulations on the podcast and having all of the amazing guests you're having on next. I really truly find it. Every time you talk about someone, I'm writing them down and I'm speaking to them as well, because I find it so interesting. You're just speaking to these people that are just out there on different levels. And Dr. Edith is, I think it's Dr. Edith, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Edith Chen.
Yeah, and she's really about connecting to our innate superpowers, really, and our abilities and our intuition and our psychic abilities, and how we've lost that as human beings and in our culture and everything else, and how that's been taken away from us, really. And things like social media and constant distraction are taking us further away from that. And I'm hopefully speaking to her in a couple of months. Have you got her? I saw you do a story with your son and teaching and doing that. So tell everyone like a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So this may sound crazy for those who haven't heard it, but I am of the firm belief, and I have reasons why, which I'll share afterwards, that the innate abilities that we have, all of us as human beings, are far greater than we've ever been led to believe. And we are just now with, the telepathy tapes coming out and learning about the possibility that telepathy is a legitimate phenomenon. I mean, you could even go back and look at several of the CIA's declassified documents where they're studying things like remote viewing, telepathy, telekinetics, other psychic phenomena openly on CIA declassified documents. And I think the trap that so many of us get in is like, yeah, other people can do that, but not me. Not me. There's no way. There's no way that I could do that. But I'm of the firm belief that these are abilities that all of us have that are innate to us. We forget that we can only perceive 0.0035% of the available electromagnetic spectrum, which means there's so many other things happening around us at all times. And yes, modern science has ways to measure those other things on the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't perceive with our eyes. But there are so many other things energetically happening around us that we don't pay attention to. But like I said earlier, when you start paying attention to these little signs from God, universe, one mind, creator, whatever you want to call it, they start appearing more, and it becomes an undeniable direct experience that this realm has inherent magic, and that we have just an incredible, beautiful, I don't even know what to call it, aspect of our being that we just have not looked at. And it's because for so many of us, it's been conditioned out of us. So that being said, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, who has been a mentor of mine, very close mentor of mine over the last 5 years now, teaches children how to perceive while totally blindfolded. And for context, at the festival that I put on once a year called Confluence, we had a demonstration where 7 children demonstrated this ability in front of roughly 750 people who were in attendance. And totally blindfolded, all 7 of these kids had the audience draw pictures that were, whatever they wanted to draw, hold it up in front of the kids, whether it's in front of them directly or at a distance, and in some cases behind their heads, calling it out with 100% accuracy, having kids solving Rubik's Cubes while totally blindfolded, playing full games of chess while totally blindfolded, reading incredibly small text or reading large text, holding up multiple 8.5 by 11 inch sheets of paper and having them say exactly what the color is, whatever's on the paper, reading books, you name it. Basically any vision-based exercise, doing it while totally blindfolded. And the beautiful thing in demonstrating that at Confluence is that those people who are skeptical immediately become believers, right? And the beautiful thing as well is a good chunk of the men and women who are witnessing this happening were literally weeping at what they were witnessing, like tears streaming down their face. And it instantly hit me when I saw this. And I wasn't crying myself because I'd seen this before, but I guarantee if that was my first time seeing it, I would have been crying right with them, right? But it instantly hit me that these grown men and women are weeping because it's like an instant recognition of how much conditioning, how much trauma, how much toxicity has been impressed upon them throughout their life that has not cut them off from, but sort of muddied or dimmed that spark that is inside of them. And it's sort of like what if I hadn't been conditioned to this level? What if I hadn't been shut down in just traumatized throughout my life. What might have been if I had been like these little kids who are being cared for and having adults around them who are helping to cultivate that beautiful spark inside of them. And at the same time, an instant recognition in witnessing these kids with these incredible abilities, that spark is still inside of them. And by witnessing this happening, it's sort of dusting off pieces of that spark inside of them as well, helping them remember who they truly are at some level. And then just one more thing on the blindfold vision, because there's some people who were skeptical and then realize, okay, this is a legitimate phenomenon that I cannot I cannot say is a hoax at this point. But so what? What's the point? And that question is crazy to me, but for those who may be sitting with that question for whatever reason right now, I just don't think like that, but that's fine. In the class, so my son's taking the class and he has this ability now, and his window has opened up to fully on this side to where like he can see all the way over here, which is pretty incredible, literally completely out of his line of sight. Some kids have windows open up on the back of their head. Some of the kids are remote viewing. Some of the kids, and I've witnessed this myself, will get on Zoom with someone who's clearly not where they are, and that individual on Zoom will hold a piece of paper or an object below the desk off camera, and the kid is calling out exactly what is below the desk. It's undeniable. But in the class, when Dr. Edith is teaching this, when the kids first put the blindfolds on, you can tell that they're just guessing, right? Like they're literally just guessing what's in front of them. And Dr. Edith and Bodan, her co-facilitator, emphasize, we want you to get it wrong. We want you to get it wrong. Because the moment that you get it right, we want you to pay attention to that. What does that feel like inside your body when you know versus when you're guessing? Okay, great. Pay attention to that. Next one. Get it wrong. Get it wrong. Get it wrong. Get it right. Okay, stop. Pause. Let's pay attention. What does that feel like inside your body? What are the characteristics of that versus when you are guessing? So what this is doing is it's honing in the intuition of these children to where that is their guiding compass when navigating this reality, so that whenever some so-called authority figure tries to tell them, you will do this, if it's an instantaneous no inside of their body because they've cultivated that meter for what is true to that degree, they're not going to go along with it. They're being guided by their soul essence. They can't be tricked. That's the reason. That's one of many reasons that this ability is so incredible. It's more than just a party trick. It's far more than just like
for sure, for sure. And I mean, governments have known about this for, I'm talking years and years and years and years, right? What's the thing? I do like a form of hemisync meditation. And have you heard of the hemisync meditation with the
I've never done it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just using like waves and stuff to get you into that sort of space. And if you do it in the bath as well, you can have more of that floating sort of like sensory deprivation where you can connect in higher. So when I saw Edith doing this, I was like, yes, I need to speak to this woman. But Alec, I really wanted today to talk to you and have you in to talk about germs.
Oh, okay.
And this is something that is, I want you to teach me about what germ theory is, like you're talking it to a 5-year-old that has no idea about it. Because I have an understanding of terrain theory, an understanding of germ theory, but I want to hear from you and your lens of like what is germ theory anyway, regardless?
Yeah. Okay. So germ theory is essentially the idea that this is what people mean when they say germ theory, right? Healthy people become sick when exposed to sick people or their bodily fluids. That's essentially what people are referring to when they say germ theory. And then the presupposition is inside of those bodily fluids are pathogenic microbes, whether bacteria or fungi, or sometimes parasites, right? Or viruses which don't exist. And we can go through why those viruses do not exist. Those other three things, they do exist, but even parasites is oftentimes a misnomer. Things that are often referred to as parasites, aren't actually parasitic. They're not literally feeding off of you. They have a symbiotic role inside of our bodies.
To level out the terrain, I'm guessing.
Yep. And it's not to say that things that are termed parasite cleanse is not helpful for the body. But the problem is it's a misnomer when you're using herbs to detoxify. They're not anti-parasitic. They're helping to expedite the healing process. They're helping to aid in the bioremediation process, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, okay.
It does make sense. Can I read something to you quickly, Alec?
Yeah.
This makes sense. So for anyone listening, I want to read something like textbook what germ theory says when I searched it up, right? And see what you think of that. Yeah. It says, textbook germ theory says a small fraction of microbes cause disease when they enter, multiply, and trigger a host response. Most microbes are harmless or helpful. Is that a fair summary for you?
Yeah, that is a fair summary of what germ theory is. But when it comes to the context with human beings, people, when it comes to application of that, let's say with human beings, what we're talking about on top of that is contagion theory in addition to germ theory, right? And terrain theory, I actually don't like the name terrain theory personally. It's a misnomer because a theory is something that has been demonstrated and repeatedly corroborated in accordance with the scientific method. And there is no unified terrain theory. What I mean by that is there is no textbook definition for what are the parameters and the characteristics and what have you of terrain theory. Like everyone has a different idea for what that actually is, if that makes sense. And it isn't something that has been repeatedly tested and corroborated in accordance with the scientific method. So I like saying the terrain paradigm better because it's sort of borrowing from different avenues, from different areas in order to come to a conclusion on what makes us well versus what actually makes us sick, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go down the virology rabbit hole first, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay, so I'm going to use two different analogies here. So from the time we're a kid who can form somewhat complex thoughts, we're told that there's this fat guy in a red suit that flies around the sky on December 24th, dropping off presents to all the little kids across the earth. And countless things in our environment might lend credence to that idea, right? So we have the songs that we sing leading up to Christmas. We have the movies, the decorations. We have the night before Christmas on our local news channel or on our phone. We're watching Santa's trajectory across the sky on some Santa sleigh tracking app, or the news is showing that, right? And we might even feel some internal effects related to Santa Claus, meaning that when our parents say, "You've been a really bad kid this year, Santa's not going to bring you presents," we feel a tremendous fear related to that. Likewise, when we've been really good, our parents might say, "Oh, you're going to get extra presents this year. Your stocking tomorrow is going to be more packed than it usually is because you've been so good." We feel a sense of joy and happiness related to Santa Claus. And then on Christmas morning when we wake up, we find pieces of beard in the fireplace. We find hoof prints in our lawn. We find half-eaten cookies and milk, and we find presents under the tree. And we think that that is caused, those phenomena, you could say, these effects are caused by Santa Claus. That's what we're taught as children. We look to our left and our right. All of our siblings believe it. All of the parents seem to be playing along with it. Everyone is in agreement that all of these effects are caused by Santa, that Santa Claus is the best fit model to describe the phenomena that we're experiencing. And of course, we learn later on at some point, whether we catch our parents in the act or they just finally tell us or something like this, or a friend tells us that Santa isn't real. And then we realize that all of those effects, although Santa was the quote best fit model, can be described via other mechanisms, right? So a second thought experiment related to this is, if I were to tell you that a ping pong ball could break down a brick wall, of course you'd want to see evidence of that, right? So I say, okay, I can show you evidence of that really easily, right? I make the claim, ping pong balls break down brick walls. Like, okay, show me the evidence. All right. So the first thing that I do is I pour a bunch of corrosive acid all over the brick wall. Next thing that I do is I take a giant mallet and smash the brick wall several times. And then I tape the ping pong ball to a giant boulder, attach that to a crane, and whirl it at the brick wall, and the brick wall falls down. And I say, voila, I have demonstrated that the ping pong ball causes destruction of a brick wall. Of course, anyone witnessing that would be like, no, that's insane. The ping pong ball had negligible, if not zero, effects on the brick wall. It was because you poured corrosive acid, you hit it several times with a giant mallet, and you attached a boulder to a crane and whirled it at the brick wall. Okay, so how does this relate to virology? Remember, the claim is that a virus is an obligate intracellular parasite consisting of a proteinaceous coat surrounding a core of genetic material that enters into a host cell and begins a self-replication process that then overwhelms that individual and then is excreted out of that individual where it travels to a new person to do the same thing again. That's effectively the definition of a virus, right? And
so are we talking? Are we talking there, Alex, like the sneezing? You're around someone that's sick, and
we'll get to that part. We're talking about the supposed physical particle, right? So the point here is we're not talking about an idea. We're not talking about a concept. We're talking about an alleged physical thing. We're not talking about something metaphysical. I hear people describe viruses as a metaphysical phenomenon. We could talk about that at some point. But what they claim, meaning the medical industrial complex for a catch-all term describing all of the organizations that allege these particles exist and cause illness, we're talking about a physical thing, right? Okay, allegedly. So how does that relate to the Santa Claus analogy that I brought up and the ping pong ball analogy that I brought up? If I were to tell you that SARS-CoV-2 or insert literally any other virus in its place has not been demonstrated to exist or cause illness, you would likely go on to PubMed or Google Scholar, or these days ask ChatGPT because no one knows how to actually research anymore. So go on to just ChatGPT or say, hey, Grok, debunk this. And you'd find a number, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of mainstream studies, even just on SARS-CoV-2, if not hundreds of thousands, if not even more than that, on all so-called viruses that describe the isolation and characterization and pathogenic properties of insert literally any virus. You'd find thousands and thousands of papers on them, right? And if you read the title, the abstract, the conclusion, a summary, you would send that to me and be like, this is insane. How can you possibly say these things have never been demonstrated to exist? There are thousands and thousands and thousands of papers. There are thousands and thousands of experts who oppose what you're saying. How could you possibly say something this insane? The problem with that is when you read the methods section of that paper, of any virus isolation paper in existence, and the methods section is describing the procedure that they followed in order to come to the conclusion, in order to back the claim that they are making, right? So it just outlines the exact steps that they took in that so-called experiment to come to that conclusion. And when you read the methods section of any virus isolation paper, you will find that it goes as follows. They take snot from a sick person or other fluids from a sick person that are assumed to contain virus particles. Emphasis, bold letters, underline, assumed to contain virus particles inside that fluid from a sick person. Those fluids are then added to what's called viral transport medium. Inside viral transport medium, at a minimum, are amphotericin B, which is an antifungal that is there, as they claim, to keep the environment sterile and free of fungal growth, right? But the problem with amphotericin B is it's also known, well established, to be cytotoxic and nephrotoxic. Cytotoxic means generally toxic to cells. Nephrotoxic means specifically toxic to kidneys. That will come in a minute. Same thing with gentamicin or geneticin, which are antibiotics, essentially, antibacterials, that are there to keep the environment sterile and free of bacterial growth. Same thing with gentamicin or sometimes geneticin. They are both well established to be cytotoxic to cells and to be specifically nephrotoxic. You can literally look this up yourself for anyone watching or listening to this. Type in on Google or even type in on ChatGPT is amphotericin B known to be toxic to kidneys? Is gentamicin or geneticin known to be toxic to kidneys? Okay, so backing up, fluids from a sick person assumed to contain virus particles, added to viral transport medium. Inside viral transport medium are amphotericin B and gentamicin at a minimum. Okay, they take that mixture and add it to what are typically monkey kidney cells, or sometimes human embryonic kidney cells, sometimes epithelial cells, other cells that are kept alive via artificial means for lab procedures that they do in virtually all of cell biology. Okay? But the point is, these cells that they are using are overwhelmingly kidney cells. Now, going back to what I said about amphotericin B and gentamicin, they are nephrotoxic. They are known to be toxic specifically to kidneys. So they're adding viral transport medium that contains all that and the fluids from a sick person to these kidney cells. They add more amphotericin B and more gentamicin or geneticin. Sometimes they add penicillin, streptomycin. Sometimes they add things like trypsin. They also add what's called Delbecko's minimal essential medium or Earl's minimal essential medium or Delbecko's modified Eagle medium, which are essentially a form of nutrients for the cell. But then they also have their primary nutrients for the cell, nutrient serum, is called fetal bovine serum. And that is harvested in a way that, for the sake of this conversation, I won't get into now, but the way they harvest think about this, fetal bovine serum, which is literally fetal cow blood. Let your imagination run wild on how they even get that. Yeah, it's incredibly dark. That's used as a food source in virtually all of cell biology, by the way. So all of modern micro and molecular biology, cell biology, uses this as a food source for the cells. So with fetal bovine serum, though, specifically, they reduce the amount of it that they are administering to these cells in the viral isolation technique. So they drop the nutrient serum from 10% down to 2%, down to 1%, sometimes down to 0. If I were to cut off your nutrients or your food source, what is the word that people use when someone is having their food cut off? They are then starving them, right? So if I'm cutting off the nutrient source for these cells, I'm starving the cells, right? And if I'm adding substances that are known to be nephrotoxic to kidney cells, what am I doing to those cells? I'm poisoning those cells, right? So after all of this stuff is done, the cells experience what is called a cytopathic effect, which is essentially cell injury or death. The cells break down into a bunch of little fragments. They then take those fragments and prepare them for electron microscopy, which also involves a variety of processes that are riddled with unproven assumptions. So a guy by the name of Harold Hillman, Dr. Harold Hillman, who unfortunately has passed away, was a biologist who wrote several critiques of cell biology. And he describes how when we're looking at electron micrograph images, which are the little black and white images that you see of alleged viruses, right? When we're looking at these black and white images, they're ultimately coming from excising tissue from a complex being, first off, because like these monkey kidney cells are not representative of a complex biological, chemical, emotional, spiritual, electric being. They're cells in a dish. So to assume that that applies to nature in and of itself is a problem. In addition to that, the preparation process for electron microscopy requires dehydrating, staining with heavy metals. It requires bombarding the sample with electron beams and a variety of other things that, if done to you in your natural state, you would not look like you did before after all that was done to you. You're looking at static images that are dead on these slides that have been bombarded with a variety of techniques and procedures. You can't know with certainty that what you're looking at represents what it actually looked like before. And that's within the context of virology after having done all of those other things, right? taking snot from a sick person assumed to contain viruses, adding it to viral transport medium, which contains all those substances, adding that to monkey kidney cells or human embryonic kidney cells or other cell lines, cells breaking down into a bunch of fragments, and then you point to those fragments in the black and white images, and you say, voila, these particles, after the cells were starved and poisoned, must be viruses. This must have been what was inside the fluids of a sick person. Never mind, we never demonstrated that they were there. So Dr. Stefan Lanka, who is now a former virologist, he would say probably, because he shares the same position as me, but he is trained in virology. He is a virologist. He is quoted as saying something to the effect of, in every image that you find of a supposed virus, it comes from the cell culture, meaning that procedure that I just described. It never comes directly from the spit, the snot, the blood, the semen, or other fluids from a human being. Never. They've never demonstrated ever in the history of virology that there are actually particles inside the fluids of the sick people, which is where they, meaning the CDC, the FDA, the World Health Organization, claim that it is. It's always coming as a result of the procedure that I just described. So back to the ping pong ball brick wall analogy. That's actually insufficient to describe what's going on, because in the ping pong ball brick wall analogy, you know that the ping pong ball is actually there. We say that it doesn't have an effect, obviously, given the context of the situation, the mallet, the corrosive acid, et cetera, et cetera. But the ping pong ball is actually there. With virology, the ping pong ball is assumed to be attached to the boulder, if you get what I mean. It's never been demonstrated to even be there in the first place. And then after the wall falls down, the brick wall falls down, you point to the rubble and you say, oh, these little things must be little ping pong balls that cause the wall to fall down, if you get what I'm saying. So the resultant cellular debris after the cells have been starved and poisoned is what they point to as evidence of viruses. And that is the foundational so-called evidence for all of modern virology. And I've often said this, and I'll say it over and over and over again. The scientific method is employed in order to figure out what is the cause of a naturally occurring phenomenon. So in this case, you might say a naturally occurring phenomenon is two or more people getting sick in the same space with similar symptoms. Okay. So you come up with a hypothesis for that phenomenon. Okay. So your hypothesis might be, I think that submicroscopic particles, insert definition of virus that I gave earlier, are being transmitted from one person to the other and causing them to become sick, causing multiple people to become sick in the same space. I believe X is the cause for Y. Okay. In order to test to see if X causes Y, said more scientifically, in order to see if your independent variable is the cause for the dependent variable, the observed natural phenomenon in question, you actually need the independent variable. No duh, right? Like we all learned the scientific method at some point in grade school. In order to test your hypothesis, you need the presumed cause. You need the thing you think is the cause of the phenomenon in question to vary and manipulate to see if it produces the effect in question. You need X to see if X causes Y. It's like, no duh. Virology, in its entire history, has never demonstrated that X exists inside the fluids of a sick person where it is claimed to be. They assume it is there and proceed to add it to a variety of confounding variables, which flies in the face of the scientific method. They assume their independent variable was there. So if you do not have an independent variable to vary and manipulate to see if it produces the observed natural phenomenon in question, you are not following the scientific method by definition. And if you are not following the scientific method by definition, strictly, then you are what? Anything that is claiming to be scientific that does not adhere to the scientific method is, by definition, pseudoscience. That is what virology is, according to their own definitions. So then the question becomes, okay, how do you explain two or more people getting sick in the same space? And that's a whole separate thing we can get into. But there's actually one more thing that I want to touch on with virology. So Stefan Lanka, that same virologist I referred to, did the exact same procedure, and other people have replicated this, by the way, that virologists follow. the amphotericin B, gentamicin at the exact same concentrations using the exact same cell lines, right? Except he did not include any snot from a sick person. And again, other people have replicated this. So no snot from a sick person, meaning no possible virus present. And they got the exact same results over and over and over again, the very results that virologists point to as evidence for viruses, over and over and over again, without any possibility of any so-called virus present, which then further falsifies this idea that cytopathic effect in culture, which is the primary foundational evidence for all of virology, is actually evidence of viruses. It's not. It can't possibly be because it's been thoroughly falsified. And then one more piece that I think is highly relevant. A lady by the name of Christine Massey, who lives in Canada, has sent a number of Freedom of Information requests to various health institutions across the world, asking for evidence of viruses. And what she's asking for is essentially evidence that viruses exist directly in the fluids of sick people where they are claimed to be, right? She stipulates in her request, I'm not asking for, snot from a sick person that is then added to monkey kidney cells and other things. I'm asking for direct evidence that viruses have been isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced coming directly from the fluids of sick people, right? Which is, again, a legitimate, totally understandable request, given these are the institutions that are making the claim that there is viruses inside the fluids of a sick people that then necessitate we lock down the entire world, that necessitate that we vaccinate kids, necessitate that people lose their jobs if they don't get vaccines, necessitate all these crazy things that have occurred over the last 5 years and beyond. And again, she's not asking Kentucky Fried Chicken. She's not asking Chase Bank. She's asking the institutions that are making this claim. And a maxim of law is that the burden of proof lies on the individual making the positive claim. That is literally a maxim of law. And in each Freedom of Information request that she has submitted, the response she has received has been as follows. There are no records pertaining to your request. She submit these FOIA requests to the CDC, to the FDA, to the World Health Organization, to a variety of health institutions across the world, asking them for evidence for their claims. And they cannot provide any evidence related to their claims. So then it goes back to, okay, well, shit, how do we describe 2 or more people getting sick in the same space? Or how do we describe the symptoms of COVID? How do you describe loss of taste and smell for long periods of time? And those become some interesting questions to answer, of which there are plenty of plausible explanations for what might be the cause of these various phenomena. There are so many plausible explanations, but it requires that we step back into that childlike wonder and awe, put on our critical thinking cap, start cultivating our intuition, start thinking outside of the germ theory paradigm, which we have been indoctrinated to believe in forever, and start coming up with other possible explanations for what might be causing these things. And again, there are so many, physically and metaphysically.
Thank you, Alec. So where do we go
Is that
when we're
sufficient to describe the 5-year-old, by the way?
Yeah, well, I don't know about 5-year-old, but maybe your 5-year-olds, but not for me, not me, no chance. But I hear you. And it's been nice to actually hear it from you. Where do we go when we're talking about things, like Epstein-Barr virus, Lyme's disease, parasites we've sort of already sort of spoken about really is more for the terrain rather than against. But, those type of things, these like co-infections that people sort of, come up with that have these days. What is that?
Yeah, so there is a couple ways to go about this, right? When it comes to something like Epstein-Barr virus, for example, which is associated typically with autoimmune conditions. First off, I want to say the idea that your body in any case is ever attacking itself is absolutely absurd, and I wholly reject it. Your body is absolutely brilliant. Your body only knows healing in the best way that it can. What oftentimes gets in the way is a lot of, let's say, psychospiritual and emotional things and beliefs, foundational beliefs that are inhibiting your body from fully healing. So I'll give an analogy or an example. So my brother called me like 4 years ago, right? And this is when he was in his undergraduate degree at the University of Kansas. And I don't remember exactly what class it was. It was some like ecological class that he was in. He was like, Alec, my professor was telling us today about because of glyphosate use on farms, bees are now more susceptible to viruses and bees are dying at an alarming rate due to viruses. And he was like, and I thought about what my professor was saying based on what you've been talking about, meaning what I've been talking about at that time. And I just started talking about the terrain-based thing. He's like, and it makes no sense. Why do we have to add virus into the paradigm? Now we know that that's completely unproven. Instead of just saying, oh, glyphosate is causing the bees to become sick, we say glyphosate is making bees more susceptible to things that make them sick. No, it's just that glyphosate causes bees to become sick. Likewise, when it comes to Epstein-Barr virus, it's interesting, like with Kylie, for example, right? We used to think for a long time, from basically 2016 through 2020-ish, when we were really going through our cognitive dissonance surrounding virology, that much of her autoimmune conditions were due to dormant Epstein-Barr virus that had been activated. That's what we thought at that time, right? But then when learning about virology, we're like, this doesn't make sense because all you did was change your diet, start dealing with your emotions in a more beneficial way, start spending more time in nature and moving your body, addressing your childhood trauma, and just living a more natural lifestyle. And that Epstein-Barr virus that had been activated, in air quotes, just went away. Again, why does that need to even be in the picture? Why can't it be that, oh, my body was expressing health the best that it could, but I was getting in the way of it, expressing health. So because I was getting in the way of it expressing health, I started experiencing some chronic symptoms related to it. But then once I started living a more natural lifestyle, physically and metaphysically, those chronic symptoms all subsided. It just makes so much more sense. The Epstein-Barr virus thing doesn't even have to be in the picture. And the same thing with Epstein-Barr applies with everything that I just said about virus isolation and the demonstrating that it exists or causes anything whatsoever. And what I also find with a lot of people who have, quote, autoimmune issues, again, I'm not denying the experience of the symptoms. Those are very real. But what we're addressing here is something like Epstein-Barr virus or something like Lyme disease, which is allegedly caused by a spirochete bacteria, actually the cause of those phenomena? No one's denying the experience. No one's denying the effects. We're questioning the cause. What you find oftentimes with people with autoimmune, I won't say this exclusively, but it's that they have not addressed some psychospiritual, emotional aspects about their health. They have some underlying things metaphysically that they have not adequately addressed. And so there's stagnation in the waters of their body that is causing inflammation. And inflammation is the body's clever healing response, but it's in a chronic state of inflammation because you're not fully expressing those emotions that you need to express. You're not going into those feelings, those thought patterns that are a little bit too scary. You're not having those conversations with people who, wronged you or who you've wronged in order to come back to homeostasis. That's what I see oftentimes. And I'm not going to say it's exclusively what I see in people with autoimmune conditions, but see it pretty consistently across the board. I know Kylie would say the same thing.
Yeah, because Kylie had, what did she have? She had a multitude of different things going on as well, right? Mold.
Lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So, yeah, so the mold thing is an interesting, nuanced conversation, and I don't claim to be an expert on this, but it is interesting. So Kylie, in 2016, that's when we started our natural approach to health, and that's when she began reversing her symptoms of, quote, autoimmune, lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So in 2019, we moved into a new house. And this house was built in the 1910s, had encapsulated lead paint, meaning that we had to sign a waiver like, oh, we acknowledge this house has lead paint, but they've painted over it enough now to where it won't cause any issues, supposedly, and a variety of other issues with it. It was military housing, and that was our first time living in military housing. Before that, we lived off of the military base in just normal housing. And military housing is notorious for being toxic, but we wanted to live in military housing at this location because living off of it, it was the hood. like the hood. We ended up moving out. I'll get to that point. And our neighbors were meth dealers, and we were living in a quote average neighborhood. And like our next door neighbors were literally meth dealers. Had shots fired in the air all the time. It was wild. Anyway, so when we move into this house, Kylie's symptoms start coming back for the first time in 3 years. We're trying to figure out like what the hell is going on. Like, okay, nothing different in terms of our emotional state, nothing different in terms of the diet that we're eating, nothing different. Oh, we find black mold all over the windowsill. And then we have someone come look at our HVAC system and was like, oh shit, there's black mold all throughout our HVAC system. So for some time we were like, okay, yeah, mold is the issue. And here's the nuance with that I've come to now. If you come across that same black mold in Washington State, which for those who are not in the US, Washington State is a very humid, but not very hot place, but there's a lot of molds and funguses growing in the woods in Washington State. You could probably come up with a better example of a place out in the woods. But I know people who have gone into those same places in nature where there's the same or similar types of black mold present that is there bioremediating, breaking down organic matter that is dead to return it back to the earth, which is what mold does. And people go in there and forest bathe and reverse cancers of all types. People go on fasting retreats in these places and reverse a variety of ailments. Why is it that when they're exposed to them in this natural context, they're not getting sick? Interesting. Okay. So maybe, is it that mold is actually the problem here? Or is it that because we've designed our homes in such a toxic way these days, that when there isn't proper airflow, mold presents itself to bioremediate those toxic building materials? And an unfortunate byproduct of mold bioremediating the toxic building materials, mold leaches out these toxic building materials into the environment. Is it the mold's fault? Maybe you could argue that a little bit, but the mold's just there doing its job. The real root cause of that issue is the toxic way that we're building our homes with the toxic building materials that we're using. And in this case, encapsulated lead paint, amongst also the formaldehydes and glues that are in our drywall, in our floors these days, in our HVAC systems, all the stuff that's used in them. That's what the issue is. But nonetheless, when we moved out of that environment, it's a perfect example of terrain. When we moved out of that toxic environment into a new home, that again, our neighbors were meth dealers, all of Kylie's symptoms resolved again. They're all completely fine.
So more about like toxic house syndrome rather than it is about mold being the issue, you know. But you know, it's the same thing applies. I spoke to I can't remember his name now.
Jacob Diaz?
Nah, Jacob's on in a couple of months.
I'm stoked for you to get him on. He can go way deeper into mold and
Lyme as well. I know I've seen some of his stuff on Lyme as well, which I'm really interested about. Like he goes into quite detail about Lyme, which I'm going to find really interesting for sure. But okay, so say for example we have mold. We see mold in the house. And yes, mold, we understand, is a remediator and it's coming in to try and help us to, you know, get the house back in line, into some alignment. We still at some point need to sort the mold, right? Or
yeah, I would say so. In my opinion, yes. But then the deeper questions always need to be asked of like, what do we need to do to change the way that we design buildings? What building materials do we need to use that are not toxic so that we aren't presented with this issue over and over and over again? Because again, the mold is just going to continue appearing to bioremediate the toxic building materials if there is poor airflow and ventilation. That's what mold does.
It's really interesting, Alec. I went to view a house before I moved into this one up in the Blue Mountains, just outside of Sydney, and it's can be quite humid and quite cold. Has full weather seasons, not like the rest of Australia, and or New South Wales where I am. And there was a house that some guy built from the city who made it sort of anti-mold proof, and it was made out of all natural materials, complete natural materials, like this tiny home type thing, but it was quite big. And he talked about like the type of materials they used on the walls so the mold just wouldn't grow on it at all. And it was just like in the middle of this really humid place. And like he'd been there for a while, and I went and looked around, it was like literally nothing. Like you couldn't see any type of mold anyway whatsoever. I just found it really, really interesting that it just goes to show you what that is. I was talking to Kylie about this actually on our chat, and I actually found that a lot of my mold stuff was more of an emotional thing for me personally. I started to notice that because in childhood I didn't feel safe in my environment. So the environment that was around, like meth dealers next door, was pretty sort of normal down the road for me. Maybe not meth back in that day, but more other things. And I didn't feel safe in my environment. And I felt like mold was actually trying to sort of give me ideas of where I still didn't feel safe. And once I started to find that within my body and within my nervous system, every time I've moved anywhere else now, never been an issue with mold. There's never been a fear with mold because it's like there's a safety in my system, there's a safety in my body that doesn't come into my reality anymore. Don't get me wrong, if I go places, I'll still see mold, but where I live is the most important factor, like where I feel safe in my system, where I feel safe in my environment. So I actually feel that there's, of course, with everything, regardless of anything that's going on for anyone, I always think that there's an emotional thing going on underneath it all, always.
100%.
You know, this is where we're getting into.
Yeah, I've said that on my podcast so many times, man, that I think I don't like to speak in absolutes, but the overwhelming majority, if not all of chronic disease symptoms especially, but even like just dis-ease in general, has an underlying psychospiritual emotional component to it. Like at least that's my experience, right? Like anytime that I get, quote, sick now, I can always trace it back to a time where I was incredibly stressed out, or a time where I wasn't sleeping well because I was ruminating on negative thoughts and fears about the future and different scenarios in my life, or I had some stuff creep up from my past that I was like, I just don't want to have to deal with that right now. I don't want to have to sit and feel with that emotion. It's too uncomfortable. And then I start feeling sick every single time, dude.
Yeah. It's like when people have chronic healings and they're consistently in their chronic healing, they've already, most of the time, by the time they've come to me or speak to me, they've already gone through the heavy detoxes, the extreme biohacks, the extreme like detox protocols, parasite protocols, wiped out of their whole entire ecosystem known to man. And they're like, there's still something there. So I think anyone with any of these chronic healing symptoms, hanging healings as such in GNM would say that they understand that there is something going on underneath. There is something going on underneath the hood as well at the same time. And this is where we come into sort of, GNM world, and take what you need, leave what you don't. But I've never found anything with GNM that has been so accurate when you dig deep enough.
I'll give you an example, actually, dude, that's pretty wild in my life. And I want to preface this by saying, like, I'm not an absolutist on anything personally. And I have friends who are very knowledgeable on cancer, for example, who have had countless examples that fly in the face of the conflict that GNM proposes. For example, I know people, so like testicular cancer is supposed to deal with like a loss conflict, right? And it may be that, like, I was talking to another friend, that Dr. Hammer's work needs to be expanded upon, or there needs to be like a reframe and recontextualization. Because, like, for example, a loss, right? Testicular cancer, it could be like a loss of an experience. It doesn't have to necessarily be the loss of a loved one. Like, if we started adding additional context that, like, the characteristic of the feeling that the individual is dealing with could also be a loss, but not literally a loss of a dog or a loved one, maybe that could come into the frame. But the point is, like, one of my friends, he had testicular cancer, and it had nothing whatsoever to do. He didn't lose anyone in his life. He's like, dude, I did not lose anyone. And a lot of German new medicine absolutists would say, well, you have to have, like, there has to be, like, this is accurate all the time. And it's like, no, I did not lose anyone. I had no loss. But with that being said, in my experience, German new medicine is spot on in my own direct experience, man. And so before I even knew that as a left-handed person, my mother's side was my right side, and that a separation conflict resulted in rashes, and separation conflict, if I remember correctly, that relates to the face is ultimately related to, like, self-image and self-worth. Dude, when my mom, so this is no secret, like, my mom and I don't speak. We don't have a good relationship. It's been like 3.5 years, and hopefully there'll be resolution someday. My mom has a presence online. It's ultimately came about because I have a relationship with my dad, because my dad apologized to me for all that was done to me when I was younger. And I'm not going to hold a grudge. And I have a relationship with him, and she doesn't agree with that. That's why we don't have a relationship. But nonetheless, when she initially cut me off, like, I went into a crazy mother wound, dark night of the soul. All my shame and guilt arose from my childhood and things that I had done to other people and where I was out of alignment in my life and things that had been done to me and just like so much unworthiness. Like typical mother wound came up, like roaring up. What also came up, because I was now separated from my mom, not speaking to her, so I got a rash right here on my right forehead that kept coming and going, being on a track, as German New Medicine called it. I would get triggered about something related to my mom or something as a byproduct of shame and guilt related to my mom. Boom, inflamed rash on the right side of my head. I'm left-handed. Separation conflict is a rash when you're either far away from someone you want to be close to or flipping that on its head. You're too close to someone you want to be separate from. Rash, inflame, right side of my head, dealing with my self-worth because my mom was publicly speaking about my relationship to my dad online. And, you know, it was painful to deal with, and it was a very emotional thing, but that was like spot on. And it was before I knew anything that specific about German New Medicine, but I looked into it, I'm like, this is literally identical to what I'm experiencing right now. Identical. So
Yeah.
I have some other examples too.
Dude, it's so wild because I think that there is always nuances to all of these things, of course, and I'm really open to all things. I'm not like a purist of GNM or anything. I'm just sort of open. What comes to me, comes to me. I take what I need, I leave what I don't with everything. And I found that, you know, they talk about this in a lot of the GNM world, that when we start taking supplements, it slows down the healing. Right. So people that take like high dose IV vitamin C when they're in cancer, they find that that's like sometimes that helps people. Right. And I was looking and reading about some of these, the people that have been in GNM for, you know, decades of this point, that they say that when taking supplements, actually what it does is it slows down the potential healing because cancer is part of the healing to them. Mm-hmm. Right. In that world. And so when we're taking these supplements, even though it's, seems like it's helping, what it's doing is it's slowing down the healing response. So the symptoms don't become as extreme. So it's like if say for example, we're having a skin rash and we take vitamin C and we see the skin rash go down. Oh, it's the vitamin C's helping. But actually what it's doing is slowing the amount of the healing that is happening, which can be helpful because, you know, as you've probably heard with some of the GNM people you've had on, there's some conflicts that you resolve that can kill you. Right. They say that you resolve a conflict and can kill you. So sometimes slowing down the healing can be a helpful protocol for some people. So you're titrating the healing rather than when you open up the floodgates, say, for example, when you connect with your mum at some point in the future, which I'm sure will happen for you, there's going to be a healing for you. You know, there's going to be, you know, might not have a face like there, or just be a skin healing, you know, like right. As that happens. But then there's a sense of trust. There's a sense of empowerment. There's a sense of like, oh, my body's doing something for me. The fear starts to drop over time. I think where things get really difficult is when we have people, and myself included, where we've been in these hanging healings, like you was experiencing with your skin rash, with this track that goes on for long periods of time, and we're debilitated and we can't live in the normal day-to-day living. But for me, when I was chronically fatigued for 2 years, 3 years even, mine was a healing. It was a healing. I came from London where I didn't feel very safe. I moved to Australia and I moved to this beautiful little part in New South Wales where my body just went, oh, and just dropped into this parasympathetic dominance where I wasn't running, fighting, fleeing anymore, into this sense of like, I'm here. And now my body went into this state of fatigue. And I was trying to do all the chronic fatigue things for it, you know, when really once I surrendered and accepted what was going on into my system, my healing started to recover tenfold because I stopped trying to get in the way of it because I wanted to go out and live my life, what I thought at that time, the way I needed to live it, you know?
Dude, it's beautiful. It's amazing. Like, that's what I love about GNM too, is your perception of a situation has a direct impact on your physical expression. And like that, I 1000% get behind. Like when you look at psychosomatics, nocebo effect, placebo effect, mass psychogenic illness, which is really like, you could say an element of nocebo effect on a mass scale, or mass social contagion, which is an element of the nocebo effect on a mass scale, or on the flip side of that, the Maharishi effect, which is like an element of, or an extension of, you could say, the placebo effect on the mass scale, you just come to the conclusion like the most important thing when it comes to our health is our foundational beliefs, thoughts, and feelings. By far the most important thing. And the scary thing for most people when coming to that conclusion is it's like, holy shit, dude, I cannot blame anyone outside of me for my current state of being anymore. I can't blame Fauci, Bill Gates, whatever happened to me when I was younger. Like, okay, yeah, maybe I was a victim at some point, but I was victimized rather at some point, but I'm not a victim anymore. And the only thing that is causing me to suffer now is my perception and my relationship to that experience. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's scary, man. It's confronting. Like, I acknowledge it. This path is not for everyone, man. Like, there's no more blaming anyone outside of you for your circumstances. And that inevitably, for most people that adopt this approach when it comes to health, the inevitable conclusion is it also relates to life. There's no more blaming government. There's no more blaming like Donald Trump. There's no more blaming any of these people, man. There's no more blame. It's all you. And because it's all you, that means it's all us. And then you come to the conclusion that like, oh, we are a collective of individuals that are collectively allowing this and perpetuating this fuckery to continue. It's us. It has nothing to do with, quote, they and them. If anything, they and them love that we believe that in all their fear-based narratives that they have coming down the pipe and all like want us to focus on the doom and gloom and the doom scrolling and all the crazy possible agendas and future scenarios. They love that we focus on that because it allows them to sit back and not really have to do shit. We squabble amongst each other and our thought energy is captured into what they're doing and not focused on creating and healing.
Yes, I so agree with that. It's emotional harvesting.
Yes.
Harvesting your emotions. And really, we are a collective, but we're not a collective. We're an extremely fragmented collective. We're divided in that collective. I know you're doing great work in bringing people together in that, and you have been doing for years anyway. And I would say people like your mum also were doing that as well, bringing people in together. So, but the thing is just like our own psyche gets fragmented from the time we're in utero and conditioned in schools and everything else, we become fragmented as a society so that we aren't in groups of people. The only time we come together is through extreme circumstances. If you see that with the blackouts in Spain was that, or was it Italy or Spain or Italy, where everyone they thought it was going to be a big panic, but they were all outside. Yeah. They were all outside together, drinking beers and enjoying time together with neighbors they've not connected to in years. And it's like, actually, this is what it is. This is what it's like to be together as a collective, to be together. So we're here. But, Alec, it's just beautiful. Thank you for all of that work that you do. I've got a couple of things I just want to ask you. I was going to ask you some other random things here, but I'm actually going to not do that. But I've got questions from the last guest that I have on to ask you a question, and they don't know who I've got coming on. So Tiziano Segurso is a family constellation practitioner. I don't know if you've ever had any family constellation practitioners on, but some beautiful work, especially of Bert Hellinger's work and stuff. But he just asked, what really makes you happy? What do you feel you are here for?
Oh, man. That is such a deep question. Like the first one that pops into my mind, man, and I've been doing such a good job about doing this lately, where at times before I have been distracted and so caught up in the doing that I forsake the being. And what makes me happy, man, is just looking into my wife's eyes, looking into my kids' eyes, and literally just that. Like looking deeply into them and seeing them, not looking at them, seeing them. And like the most mundane moments of life that are filled with so much beauty and the presence of God in every single moment. And it's such a reminder of that when I look into Kylie's eyes and when I look into my kids' eyes.
That's beautiful, man.
That's what comes up like instantly for me, especially because I've been like very good about that lately. Now, what am I here for? Man, I don't know if this is like just a belief that I've adopted. Man, there's been multiple times where due to financial issues or, someone writing hit pieces on me or things like this where I'm like, fuck this shit. I just want to go get a normal job. I have a systems engineering degree. I'll go get a good, like normal, high paying job. And deep down, I'm like, no, you're not, Alec. You're not doing that. There's no way you're doing that. And like when I have close friends and mentors I talk to that I share how I'm feeling in that present moment, like I want to be fucking done with this stuff. I don't want to do it anymore. They're like, Alec, you're not going to quit. Like that's just, it's literally not possible for you to. You know that you have a calling to do this. Now I'm still struggling to define what this is, man. But Confluence and really my podcast are the encapsulation of what this is. It's like going back to the beginning of this conversation, there are so many ways we've been conditioned as human beings to buy into and to adopt things that we are fundamentally not. And I guess I'm on a journey of trying to figure out who we truly are, what we are truly capable of, what our true power is, what our true nature is, individually and collectively. And I'm just sharing that journey with the world as best as I can. That's it. And that's what I'm here to do. Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you, Alec. And where can everyone that doesn't know you connect with you?
Yeah, so thewayforward.com is probably the best place, and that's spelled the way, FWRD.com. And shameless plug on this. Please. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, where people are so disconnected now, we're so fragmented as a society. I think that's largely because so many of us who think like you and I feel isolated, feel like we don't have people around us that get it. So what do? We turn to these devices. We turn to this, which serves a purpose. It's allowed us to connect. It's great. And it's not a replacement for real community. It's not a replacement for what I just said regarding my wife and my kids, for looking someone in the eye and seeing them, for giving a hug, for being around people to where it's so relaxing in your nervous system, people who just get it, who are oriented towards the same thing, trying to figure out who we truly are. And so we've developed a platform that allows you to instantly connect with people wherever you are in the world. So that platform on thewayforward.com, just sign up to join, has a map where you can type in your zip or postal code or just set your custom geolocation, and it will instantly populate all of the people in your local area who are on this path with us. And it will also populate on our business directory all the practitioners of a variety of types, anything from German medicine to biofield tuning to Reiki to massage therapy. Also, all the farms near you, anything from raw dairy to just organic fruits and vegetables. Also populate all of the alternative schools near you, anything from a homeschool co-op to a Montessori to a Waldorf to another type of alternative. So I hate that word alternative, but you know what I mean. Better schools. And it will evolve to be the go-to resource for this community, for people to find their local community, so that no matter what's going on out there, no matter the fear-based narratives, you feel so secure in your nervous system, you feel so held, because you know that in your local area immediately around you, you have all your people, you have all your practitioners, you have all your farms. So it doesn't matter what's happening, what's going on, what's going to come in the future. We got this together.
Yeah, that's not a plug, Alec. That's a service. That's a service for people, truly. So thank you for having that vision and stepping into that. It's been beautiful. Thank you so much, Alec. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and see you all soon.